Pastor John MacArthur, thank you so much for joining me here. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's my joy, David. Thank you for giving me the privilege.
Well, I would say where do we begin, but why don't we just start with how are things now as it relates to the church and in California and kind of the legal fight that's going on? I mean, is this something that I'm assuming ever before to this level for sure?
Yeah, in 1978, we were sued for what was the first case in America of clergy malpractice. The young man who was a university student attended our church, and he committed suicide. So the family sued us because they said preaching on sin exacerbated his predisposition to depression and led to his suicide. That case went on for 10 years, ended up in the U.S. Supreme Court that referred it back to the California court, and the court gave us the victory in that. But for 10 years, we were exposed to the threat of not being able to counsel people or to preach the scripture if the courts decided that we were guilty when somebody took their life under some kind of depression. So that was a 10-year battle that was very interesting, but it didn't have anywhere near the impact that this current one does, because in the situation now, they don't want us to have church. Mm-hmm. And that relates to the entire congregation and everything we do. So they've tried every way to stop it by putting health mandates on us that are so onerous and so utterly impossible that we couldn't even do them. And that was the idea, to shut down a large church like ours, because there was no way we could obey that. So to try to stop them from coming after us, we filed a court case. We won that case. They went to the appellate court at the last minute last Saturday, got it overturned. So currently the church is under no temporary restraining order, which worked out great for us because we just went back to church on Sunday. Mm-hmm. The place was full of people everywhere we could look. And it also was our first Sunday to have 1,000 children back. We hadn't had Sunday school for 6 months. So It was incredible.
You say they're going after the church, basically. So we're going to call this what it is, religious discrimination. Is this basically the contention here?
Yeah, because if you look at the fact that liquor stores and abortion clinics are essential and they're all allowed to be open, but a church is deemed not essential, so it was closed. All the churches were basically given these onerous restraints. So yeah, there's no question that it targeted that. If in California, there are 364 abortions a day. There'll be about 140,000 of them this year. So this isn't moral high ground. You can kill a baby here, but you just can't go to church.
Yeah, and I wonder how much the Black Lives Matter protest really factored into this in terms of putting this all together, the calculation of what California officials did, the governor and others, and allowing that to happen, but not allowing you to have church. Was that kind of, in a way, a straw that broke the camel's back here to a degree?
Right, and that is precisely how we argued our case. The last week, there were basically protests in Los Angeles for 5 straight days and nights. Massive crowds of people milling in the streets without, regard for any of the supposed safety restraints. And there were previous riots in LA. That was fine. Nobody wanted to stop that, but you couldn't go to church. So it was obviously targeted. And they were obviously letting those who wanted to break down the order of this society, who wanted to do harm, have their day, but not those who are here to preach the gospel and do what is righteous.
Yeah. Pastor MacArthur, let me ask you a little bit about the spiritual underbelly of all of this and what is going on in our nation and our culture today, because it seems like this didn't just kind of happen if in a test tube. I mean, this seemed to be building for a very long time. And I'm wondering if you could address some of the spiritual state of our nation and as to how this has been kind of sucked up into the oxygen of all of that.
Yeah, and there are 2 ways that I would look at that, David. Number one is this. In Romans chapter 1, it says in verse 18, the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness of men who hold the truth in unrighteousness. Nothing could ever be more defining of America than that we hold the truth in unrighteousness. Mm-hmm. I mean, we were founded on Judeo-Christian ethics, morals, and standards. The assumption was that this state nation started because people wanted religious freedom. That's buried deep into the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and the First Amendment. So if any nation has ever held the truth, we have. But we are holding it in unrighteousness. This nation, to be honest with you, sort of collectively looks like the Jerry Springer show. And that really is what Romans 1 tells us. Romans 1 says, the wrath of God is revealed. And then it defines what that is. First of all, God gave them over to sexual immorality. That's the first thing that happens. That's in Romans 1:24. The second thing, God gave them over to homosexuality, verse 28. The third one, verse 26 rather, verse 28 is he gave them over to a reprobate mind. So what wrath is this? Well, it's not eschatological wrath. It's not eternal wrath. It is the wrath of abandonment when God abandons a nation to its own sins. When God pulls back his restraints, what will you see? A sexual revolution followed by a homosexual revolution followed by a reprobate mind. And out of that reprobate mind at the end of the chapter comes all kinds of evil. And it also says, even though they know these things bring about death, they not only do them, but they applaud the people who do them. So that's the sort of Jerry Springer idea. So we're living in a time, people say, well, the wrath of God must be near. No, we're in it. And the evidence is we've gone through the sexual revolution, through the homosexual revolution. And when you get the reprobate mind, what would that look like? Well, that would be when you're a man, but you think you're a woman. That's when you've reached a level of insanity. The other way I look at it is this, biblically speaking, we have a collision of sinners in the world. We're all fallen. The wages of sin is death, and everybody dies. So how does God restrain sin so society can flourish for his redemptive purposes and his glory? He has to put restraints. Restraint number one is the law of God written in the heart, and the weapon is the conscience. So what needs to happen if you want to get rid of that is you rewrite the law, you turn morality on its head, turn it inside out, and then tell people if they have a guilty conscience, they shouldn't, because they're better than that. They shouldn't feel shame. So you do everything you can to assault the conscience and assault the law written in the heart. The next restraint is the family. So if you want to get rid of that, you destroy the family. Every way possible, you go after the family. We get that. That's what's been going on for decades now. The third restraint is the police. So are we surprised when the police are now under assault? They've already done in the human conscience. They've done in the family, and now they're after the police. Defund the police, spit on the police.
Right.
That's the third restraint, government, Romans 13. The fourth restraint is the church. The church is salt and light in the world, so let's go after the church. This is a systematic, satanically inspired assault on all the divine restraints in the world. We shouldn't be surprised that it's happening because it's folded into the very wrath of God, where he turns over a society to their sinful choices, and the consequences are inevitable.
Yeah, this is all fascinating to me. You know, I cover politics, and the culture is not only upside down, our politics are so divisive right now. And not that I want you to necessarily opine on the politics, though I am curious, with an election coming up and you've got a president, and talk about a president, God uses imperfect people for sure for his perfect will, but you've got religious freedom trying to be protected by this administration, and you have another potential administration coming along that might narrow, if not eliminate, some of those freedoms. How concerned are you about the politics of all of this?
Well, to me, it's not politics as such. It's morality. And let me start at the beginning point. The conservative people, and I think this is generally true, conservative people are truth seekers. This is true even of young conservative millennials. They want to know the truth. They have an open mind to know the truth. I've been asked now to write a column regularly for the Daily Wire. That's a millennial group of people, and they're wanting to know the truth. On the other hand, liberal and progressive millennials just want to tear down. They just want to destroy. And you know, the most dangerous person in a society is the person who doesn't believe anything. You know, if you don't believe anything, you're the most dangerous person there is, because if you've got nothing to lose, how do we control you? So you have one side of this political spectrum where destruction is the means of everything, and you have the others trying to find the truth. We can say, thank God that we have a president who's conservative, surrounded by people who care about the truth and who believe in moral righteousness and moral good and are fighting against evil. Look, no politician is going to be everything we want. The question is not politics, it's morality. A Christian couldn't possibly vote for someone who would legalize killing babies in the womb. That's premeditated murder at the worst point. Or somebody who advocated immorality, homosexuality, transgender activity, who wanted to outlaw conversion therapy. All of those things are baked into the platform of the Democratic Party. This is not about social views. This is not about economic views. This is a battle between biblical morality and what's left of it and outright blatant sin. And for a believer, there's only one possible way you can go, and that is to vote for righteousness for the honor of God and to allow the society to flourish in God's redemptive purpose.
My final question to you as we wrap up here, a micro question and a macro question as to how you at the church and others go about kind of fighting the battle ahead of you. How do you plan to do that? And from a macro standpoint, how does the church writ large try to figure out a way to have final victory, or at least victory here on this earth, on issues of morality and religious freedom?
I read the ending and we win. Christ said, I will build my church and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. And Paul said, we always triumph in Christ. So we win in the end, but we don't win by folding up. We win by fighting the fight. The Apostle Paul said, I have fought the good fight. When he went into a town, he didn't ask what the hotel was like. He asked what the jail was like, because that's where he knew he'd be staying. That never has threatened faithful believers. We have made heroes out of people who have gone against magistrates and gone against sovereigns and gone against kings through all of church history. We have honored and adored the underground churches and the churches that met when it was against the law. And it's still going on. There's not a day that goes by that I don't read about a church that was burned or a pastor that was killed in India or some part of the Middle East. This is nothing new for the church. The church in America needs to be the church. So you ask what we're going to do. We're just going to be in church. We're going to be here every single week. And last Sunday was the first Sunday we invited all the children back. We hadn't had Sunday school for 6 months, which is a travesty against those children and those families. So we had 1,000 little kids pouring into Grace Church last Sunday. We had balloons everywhere to welcome them back. Every nook and cranny of the place was filled. Whatever happens to us, we're going to be the church. We're going to stand up. This is the time to fight and proclaim the gospel of Jesus Christ far and wide. And as a result of that, David, we're having people who don't normally go to church come to find out what's going on, and they're hearing the gospel.
Even better news. Pastor John MacArthur, an honor and a pleasure. Thank you so much for being with me. I appreciate it.
My joy. Thanks.